Commissioner Meyer,
Here.
Commissioner Sanchez,
Here.
Commissioner Dozier.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Please stand up for the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Meyer, can you lead us?
Yes. Please place your right hand over your heart and follow me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item C on the agenda, public comments. Now is that at this time, a person may address the Planning Commission on matters within the jurisdiction of the Planning Commission, including information, consent items, and any item not appearing on the agenda. The chair shall limit public comments to 3 minutes. The Planning Commission cannot take any action on any item presented during public comments that is not on the agenda, and such item may only be referred to the Commission Secretary. Persons wishing to speak on public hearing items should do so at this time of the public hearing. I see that nobody is here, so let's move on to the consent agenda. Approval of minutes for November 21, 2019. Has all the commissioners has any questions, concerns, or corrections? Okay, so shall we vote?
Move.
Second.
Okay, we have a move by Commissioner Chavez and second by Commissioner Meyer.
All those in favor?
Commissioner Chavez,
Aye.
Commissioner Meyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Sanchez,
Aye.
Commissioner Dozier,
Aye.
Vice Chair Chua.
Yes.
Motion pass.
On the item 2 under D, adoption of the 2020 Planning Commission calendar. Mr. Kowitz?
Thank you, Vice Chair Chua and members of the Commission. I wanted to point out before we adopt or consider adopting the calendar, your first meeting of the year is scheduled on January 2nd. That's an unusual day for a commission to potentially meet given the holiday season and everything else that's happening. Staff actually recommends that we break protocol and actually not meet on that particular day, but hold a special meeting potentially on January 9th, a week later, as we go back into the regular year, and then continue on January 16th. Looking at our projection for items coming before you, we have enough to fill both of those dates in January. So staff wanted to share that with you, but it's at the pleasure of the commission if you wish to meet on January 2nd as you typically would, or possibly just cancel that altogether.
Vice Chair Chua, I'd like to go with the staff's recommendation and not meet on the 2nd.
Is that a motion?
Yes.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Dozier and second by Commissioner.
Wait, point and inquiry about this. Are we approving the calendar with the amendment that we don't meet on the 2nd, but instead meet on the 9th?
Yes.
Yes.
That's what it sounds like.
Yes.
Okay, then yes, second.
Okay, so roll call, please.
Commissioner Dozier,
Yes.
Commissioner Chavez,
Yes?
Commissioner Meyer,
Yes.
Commissioner Sanchez,
Yes.
Vice Chair Chua.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, moving on to public hearing, item E of the agenda. Before we start, have any commissioners want to disclose any communications with anybody regarding this case?
None from Chavez.
None? So no communications as well from me. Thank you. Okay, so let's go ahead and call item E1 for Verizon. Mr. Dabrowski?
Thank you, Vice Chair Chua. Members of the Planning Commission, the item before you this evening is the Verizon Danube project, known as PZ 18-530-01. The applicant is also here tonight. The request is for the construction of a 47-foot tall wireless communications facility that will be designed as a faux eucalyptus tree. It will also include associated equipment within an enclosure, all within 596 square feet of lease area. That will be adjacent to an existing 3-story self-storage facility. The request also includes 2 deviations to the C2 PD zone standards. The first is an increase in height from 35 feet to 47 feet. The second is a reduction in the rear yard setback from 15 feet to 10 feet. This is a site plan of the proposed facility. The faux eucalyptus tree would be located in the southern corner of the property, and the related equipment enclosure would be located just on the other side of a trash enclosure. This is a rendering of the proposed facility. Note the faux eucalyptus tree and also the equipment enclosure. The site is located next to the El Rio area and is largely surrounded by commercial development. The facility is consistent with the general plan designation and the zoning district standards. That analysis is detailed in the staff report. Here's an aerial view of the site. Again, the facility is located in the bottom right corner of the property. Surrounding land uses include mostly commercial development. There is a condo development on the southern side of the facility. This is a view of the proposed site. The proposed development would be located at the end of the street on the left-hand side. This is a close-up view of the project site. The existing tree on the corner of the property would be removed and replaced with the faux eucalyptus tree. This is a view looking back towards Ventura Boulevard. The proposed equipment enclosure would be located just on the other side of that existing trash enclosure. In 2003, City Council approved special use permit for the self-storage building. The self-storage building was constructed to be 35 feet tall, which is the maximum allowed height in the C2 zone. To date, no changes have been made to the building. In 2015, the Planning Commission granted special use permit for a 44-foot tall wireless communications facility. That facility was designed as an architectural feature on the rooftop. That facility was never constructed, and subsequently the SUP expired. This is a simulation of the previously approved wireless communications facility. Note the parapet wall on the left-hand side. The site as it exists is on the right-hand side. In 2015, the facility was proposed as a parapet wall that was located on the front of the building along Ventura Boulevard. The related equipment was located at the rear of the building, very close to where it is currently proposed. In 2015, the facility was proposed as a parapet wall. The wall was approximately 9 feet high and 80 feet wide. That design included a request for construction above the maximum height allowed in the C2 zone. At the time, that proposal also included the equipment enclosure located behind the building, very close to the current proposal. However, that project was determined to be infeasible because the roof of the building would not support the proposed facility. The roof, in order to support the project, would require substantial improvements, and thus the design was prohibitively expensive. The current proposal includes 2 deviations from the C2 zone standards, the first being an increase in maximum allowable height. The applicant is requesting that increase so that the signal can project over the adjacent building. The building is 35 feet tall, and the proposed facility is the minimum height required to clear the building. Thus, staff recommends you approve the additional height. The second deviation is a reduction in the rear yard setback. The applicant requests this because the proposed facility requires a caisson, and the caisson cannot be located too close to the existing building to undermine the foundation. Therefore, staff recommends you also approve the reduction in the rear yard setback. The proposed facility, as it is proposed, would be located at the end of Financial Square Road, adjacent to the self-storage building. This photo shows the adjacent trees in the area. Note the 62-foot high tree just across the street. This is another rendering of the proposed facility from the end of Financial Square, looking north. With the application, the applicant submitted propagation maps to demonstrate the gain in signal coverage with the increase in height. Note that at the 30-foot height, the facility does not reach the proposed coverage areas. At the 40-foot height limit, the signal does reach the proposed coverage areas. With an increase to the 40-foot height limit, there's no substantial gain within signal coverage. As it is proposed, the facility is prominently visible along the Financial Square right-of-way. The proposed facility would be a faux eucalyptus tree, which would clash with the adjacent magnolia trees along the existing building. The question for your commission this evening is how to weigh the strict application of the setbacks and the height, and also minimize the adverse visual impacts of the proposed facility. Thus, staff is recommending that the proposed facility be located behind the building, approximately 50 feet north of its proposed location. The recommended location would preserve the existing landscaping along Financial Square, and the facility would not be as prominently visible from Ventura Boulevard. Note that there is a condition of approval which would allow the planning manager to determine the exact location of the facility. This photo shows the proposed location and also the staff recommended location. Note the recommended location is located behind the building. This is a different view showing the proposed location and also the recommended location. This is a rendering of what the proposed location would look like. Note the existing landscape tree would be preserved and the faux eucalyptus tree would be located behind the building. This diagram shows the previous design of the facility in 2015. It also shows the proposed design and the staff recommended design. Note that the building is 35 feet high. The 2015 design resulted in approximately 700 square feet of massing above the 35-foot height limit. The proposed facility would be visible from Ventura Boulevard. The staff recommended location would result in approximately 250 square feet of massing above the 35-foot height limit. The proposed development would be subject to several conditions of approval. This slide showcases some of them. Note condition of approval number 24, which requires the facility be located behind the existing building. Some other conditions include the maintenance of the facility. The permit would be valid for only 10 years, and the facility must comply with all FCC regulations. Since the project is new construction within 596 square feet of lease area, and the project does not trigger any thresholds within the city CEQA guidelines or exceptions to the exemptions, staff finds this project is exempt from CEQA pursuant to section 15303 and recommends your commission find this project exempt. The site is located within the El Rio neighborhood. Therefore, this project was presented to the community workshop back in April earlier this year. At that workshop, there were no public comments regarding this project. Based on the previous discussion, staff recommends that your commission find this project to be exempt from CEQA and approve the planning and zoning permit number 18-530-01, subject to certain findings and conditions. That concludes my presentation. At this time, I want to draw your attention to the errata memo, which you should have received just the other day. This memo calls out an attachment which was not included in its entirety to the staff report. I'm available for any questions. The applicant is also here.
Thank you, Mr. Dabrowski. Thank you for your presentation. I would like to acknowledge the presence of Chair Frank.
Yes, so it's too bad our traffic engineer is not here this evening, because maybe he could tell me why the number 2 lane on southbound Victoria is closed at Gonzales. So everyone is merging into the number 1 lane. Of course, there's no advanced traffic advisory when you're coming from Ventura to advise you that the street is going to narrow ahead and this traffic is going to take you 1 hour and 12 minutes to get from Victoria and Ralston to Victoria and Gonzales. And that's what it took me. So I'm sorry that I was delayed. I'm going to allow Vice Chair Chua to continue with the meeting. And may I inquire, Mr. Rosell, did you get my email? Okay. It's a good thing a cop wasn't next to me to nail me for being on my phone trying to communicate with you, because my Siri didn't work to say email Mr. Rosell. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Frank. Let me now open the hearing to commissioner discussion. Commissioner Chavez.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Mr. Dabrowski, I do have a few questions in regards to your presentation. Specifically, where is it? Okay, slide 12, it said that in 2015, special use permit was approved by the Planning Commission for a 44-foot tall wireless tower, and it was approved. Then they allowed it to expire, and now they're asking for a 47-foot. Do you know the reasons why?
Commissioner Chavez, the applicant can answer that question better than I can. However, the increased height has to do with the signal coverage that must project over the building. The 2015 design was located at the front of the building, whereas the current design is located at the rear of the building.
Okay, it also says that one of the conditions of approval in regards to slide 24, staff recommended location, condition of approval number 24 allows the planning manager to determine the exact location. But on slide 29, it says condition of approval 24 says that the facility will be located behind the existing building. Can you explain why there are 2 different languages for that condition?
Commissioner Chavez, yes. Regarding the proposed location of the facility, the facility may need to be located further from the building based upon the construction requirements. The applicant can respond to that better than I can.
So if the commission approves the proposed location to be visible off of Financial Square, condition of approval number 24 will ultimately override our decision.
Commissioner Chavez, you can also remove that condition
Okay.
from the recommended conditions.
Thank you for that. On the applicant doesn't plan on giving a presentation, correct, or do they?
The applicant does have a presentation.
Okay, then I'll hold the rest of my questions. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you. Anybody else? Commissioner Doshi.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you, staff, for the presentation. Just one quick question concerning these types of projects within our city. When there's wind and some of this, the fake trees are damaged, could you kind of explain to me how code or how the city checks on that to make sure that the developer fixes the fake tree if it blows down? And how long, far as like if it gets someone notifies the city that one of these trees has fallen down, how long before it gets repaired or expected to be repaired?
Right, Commissioner Dozier, regarding the maintenance of the facility does have to be maintained with all of these screening elements in place. You are correct in that over time the facility will deteriorate, and so I don't know the exact lifespan of each branch, but the applicant can respond to that.
And,
Okay, I'll say that.
and if I could help out with that a little bit more, Jay brought up this slide in particular. Condition number 28 specifically talks about maintaining the look and stature of the tree. The tree themselves, they have an engineered foundation, so it considers things like wind load and those sort of factors. So the thought is, unlike a regular tree which doesn't have an engineered foundation, this one would, to withstand what it would be anticipated in terms of wind and other natural elements. If something did occur to it, like any code enforcement action, the city has a number of different tools in our belt to make sure that things are maintained, cleaned, repaired, and so on and so forth.
Okay, that satisfies my question. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Anybody else has a question? Okay, Commissioner Sanchez.
Yes, Mr. Dobrowolski, thank you for your report. It was very good. Just a couple questions. I see that there was a community workshop held on April 9th, 2019. No one showed up. That's sort of a shame because, so what is the procedure as far as you send letters to all the neighborhoods, or how does that work?
Yes, Commissioner Sanchez, regarding the community workshop procedure, the applicant notifies the entire neighborhood, which could be in upwards of 1,200 residents. The residents receive a notice in the mail, and that workshop is held about every third Monday of the month. And so on a monthly basis, certain projects are presented to the neighborhood. During those workshops, sometimes members of the public will comment on the project. Those comments are then forwarded to you in the staff report.
Okay, thank you. And just a little bit of a curiosity on the bullet, all the conditions, and one of them found very interesting. Number 26, which is planning. Prior to issue of permit, developer will revise plans so that any warning signs or advisory signs required by the FCC will be displayed in Spanish. I really haven't seen that before, so I'm just wondering what triggers that, what triggers that, because sort of more curious than anything else.
So as we've looked at best practices, if you will, for different jurisdictions up and down the state, these sort of conditions are finding their way in there in areas where you have heavily populations that may be speaking one language versus another. So it became both English and Spanish seemed to make sense in terms of warning signs. Essentially, the signs that the FCC requires us and the wireless industry to put up essentially warns about potential radiation issues if you get within a certain distance of the antennas themselves. You have to be pretty close for it to hit, but they're signs at a eye level, if you will, at the base of the facility, so you're not trying to climb up anything.
So basically, so this is going to be more commonplace then, probably? Or it's just every once in a while that this gets triggered?
For our wireless applications, I'm anticipating that this type of notice is going to be continued on for those applications.
I think it's great. I think it's a good trend. People, too bad no one showed up. I mean, people should be excited in that neighborhood that they're going to get better coverage, you know. But thank you.
Anybody else? Commissioner Meyer, do you have any questions? Chair? I got a question. How does staff calculate the height of the building? I mean, if there's a different, if there's different sections of the building that has different height, how do we calculate it? Because on the design back in 2015, they were adding a parapet that would bring the building up to 44 feet. And staff claimed that that will bring the overall height of the building to 44 feet, or is that something that we average?
Vice Chair Chua, regarding the calculation of building height, the maximum height is calculated from adjacent grade all the way to the topmost point of the building.
Right.
So the proposed facility back in 2015 would have raised the height of the building up to 44 feet.
But just that portion of the building.
Yes, that's correct.
So the rest of the building is still at 35 feet, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So you mentioned that the site will be preserving landscaping on one of your slides. The question is, they're removing one of the trees to put in the fake tree. So how is that preserving the landscaping if we're removing a natural landscape?
Vice Chair Chua, in the slide shown here, the proposed location would require the removal of a magnolia tree on the corner of the building. The recommended location would also require the removal of a tree.
Right.
However, the trees in the rear of the building are not as large and are not as screening the building as the landscape trees on Financial Square.
Okay, so it's more accurate to state that the landscaping will be touched, but it's got less impact than the proposed, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, okay. So on condition number 24, in follow-up to Commissioner Chavez's question, you know what, maybe this is a question for the applicant. So if nobody else has a question, go ahead, please. Commissioner Chavez.
Just going to piggyback off of your questions in regards to the trees. How many trees total are going to be taken out based off of the applicant's proposal and the city's recommendation?
Commissioner Chavez, the applicant's proposal would require the removal of one tree. The staff recommended location would require the removal of one tree. So the net total is the same.
Okay, I only asked that because when you look at slide number 11, it shows that the site, you have the big magnolia tree off of Financial Square, and then directly behind it, it looks like the yellow square box actually encompasses two trees right there. Or am I looking at that incorrectly?
Commissioner Chavez, that would be the general location of the equipment enclosure, And as proposed, the equipment enclosure could be built behind the trees.
Okay, so it's proposed to be behind the trees. Now, is there any plan to relocate that magnolia tree, or is it just a complete removal from the project?
As proposed, the tree would be removed.
And what about the city's one tree? Does that plan on being relocated or just completely removed?
Again, that tree would just be removed.
All right, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Okay, just one follow-up question. Compared to the 2015 design, how many trees would be removed between the two? I mean, what's the difference?
Vice Chair Chua, the 2015 proposal would not require the removal of any trees because the equipment enclosure could be built behind the trees in the rear of the building.
Okay, so this new design would require removal of one tree instead of none.
That's correct.
Thank you. Okay, so I don't have a speaker card. Does the applicant would like to speak, or I heard that the applicant has a. Okay, so please fill out a speaker card. Applicant doesn't need. I'm sorry.
You could, sir, you can fill out the speaker card later. I don't really think we need a speaker card since you're the applicant. So your presentation is not subject to any time limit. So.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chair. Could you please state your name and address, residence?
Yes.
I'm sorry, city of residence.
Yes, good evening. My name is Scott Dunaway. My address is 1114 State Street, Suite 234, Santa Barbara, California, 93101. Good evening. I did prepare a quick presentation for you tonight. Mr. Deborowski pretty much covered quite a few of my slides, so I may run past a few quickly if that's okay with you. Let's see if I can get this to work. There we go. So again, this is just the location. This is the frontage of the public storage building at the corner of the front area of the building, just to give you a quick photo. To orient ourselves, again, we're off of Financial Square. We're locating in the rear setback area. This is the proposed location. Would be right behind that light standard on the corner of the building for the new mono eucalyptus tree. And again, the equipment would be adjacent to the trash enclosure. A quick elevation for you, which I believe you've seen. This is a slide I wanted to present. This is a top-down plan view of the antennas of the proposed location. You've got just onto the left here is just the orientation of the antennas. The top right-hand corner is the very top of the looking down on, so you would see the trees the foliage that covers the antennas. But the important slide is the one on the bottom right. We are taking advantage of being in that corner location. As you can see, our azimuths, the antenna points are tucked in there and pointing from that corner location so that they are free and clear from any obstructions from the building. A rendering that I do believe you did already see. Another one. This is the location and how it fills in with Verizon's existing facilities. The circled one is the Danube project that I'm here for tonight. Currently, does this have a pointer on it, Jay? Oh, very good. Currently, the project location is being covered by this sector off of the existing Nyland site, and that's the reason we're not getting enough coverage in that area, and that's the reason we're here, because there is a gap in coverage in the area. As you can see, this project, the Danube project, fills in a hole in between the existing facilities and will work well for Verizon's network. This is Verizon's existing coverage out there currently. As you can see, the green is very good or excellent. The yellow is a good quality service. Getting down to the aquamarine blue is very poor, and then the gray is no coverage. So this Danube project will definitely fill a hole in the system, in the network. This is with the coverage at a 40-foot rad center. And the 40-foot rad center means that that is the middle of the antennas. And that's where they project their propagation from, is from the middle of the 8-foot antennas. And this is just a standalone, giving you an overview of the complete, just by itself, what kind of coverage just this facility would provide. Again, this is the staff's recommendation of the proposed project and the recommended location that we received. And we did, and this to the left there would be the area. If we moved it back, that's what it would look like. There is that dotted line right here, which is the footing of the building. This project, due to the 2016 building code and the structural and wind loading that we need to have, will have a 5'6" circumference for a footing for structural. So we would need to be off of that footing, and we would have to move out further, and we would be overhanging off of the existing property line at that location. In addition, because we're not on the corner, our antennas would be right on top of the existing building. The way that these networks work and these antennas work is that they propagate a lobe. So they come out like this and they go like that off of the antennas. Our sector, this sector right here, would not be getting the beneficial service as it did if we were on the corner, because on the corner we have no obstructions. On the recommended location, we would be obstructed from the building on the lower lobe, and it would degrade the facility's propagation. These are just some other facilities that are currently other towers in the area that we did look at, but they are further away, and also the coverage in that area is okay now, and they don't need to be filled. So that's why we were looking for another standalone project. Generally, we like to go out and look for a co-location facility if we can, before we go out and build a new facility. But at this time, I am seeking the proposed project that was filed due to the coverage ability. And back to this slide here, the bottom right-hand corner is very important to Verizon, especially with the height. The 40-foot rad center, again, is the middle of the antenna. So then the top of the antennas are at 44. The additional height, 47, is the additional foliage on the tree to make it look like a tree and not just a flat top tree. So that's the reason for our height increase and our location that we've currently proposed. I'm available to answer any questions that you may have, and thank you.
Any questions from the commissioners?
I just have one.
Go ahead, Commissioner Dorsey.
If you could go to, I think it was the 4th slide, it kind of shows the proposed look. Yes, that one. When was this photo taken? I'm trying to determine because on this photo, the tree in question has no leaves, and our package is full.
I believe I was looking at this today when I was putting this together, and it was taken in February.
Okay.
So it was February of last year.
Okay, because that looks like a totally different tree than what's on page 11 of staff's presentation.
Right, I think it's just a different season. I'm not too familiar with magnolia trees, if they do drop their leaves or not, but this was taken in February.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Anybody else? Question of the applicant, Commissioner Chavez.
Thank you for the presentation. I had asked staff in regards to, maybe you mentioned this, but if you can just repeat it again, the reasoning why 4 years ago it was okay for a 40-foot and now you're requesting a 47?
The approval
height, sorry.
in 2015 was for a 44-foot top of structure. That would be the same top of antennas that we're looking for here. The additional 3 feet is for the additional foliage on top of the tree. So it just doesn't come up like that, it comes up and looks more like a tree. So that's the reason for the additional 3 feet that we're requesting.
Now, you guys, does Verizon own that property, where the storage facility is at?
They have a leasehold on the property. They do not
Okay.
own the underlying ground, but they do
So-
have a ground leasehold on the property.
They're allowed to make changes to the property, such as what you're being proposed right now?
Yes.
Okay. Now, is there any requirements as far as distance between the actual tower and the equipment that needs to be met? Because your proposal shows that you're preferring the tower to be off of Financial, and I see why, because you want to get the best coverage possible, but your equipment is located on the other side of a trash enclosure. Is that just based off a layout, or is there a reason why it's that far apart?
Primarily, this is based on the layout. Generally, they like to stay within about 150 feet maximum from the equipment, the computer equipment, to the antennas. And that means the vertical up the pole, which would be 40 feet, and then the horizontal to the equipment. So that's the range they like to stay in, is about 150 feet before they start losing the decibel on the computers.
So, I guess based off of the staff report as well as your presentation, it shows that there was no substantial difference between a 40-foot and a 45-foot. So why wouldn't Verizon just go with a 40-foot height versus a 47? Because I figure 40-foot, you request a 45, and then you could still cone off the top of the tower as a tree.
So the propagations that were provided and the foot level has to do with the rad center again. So the 40-foot would be a 40-foot middle of antenna, and that's what we're seeking. And then the 45-foot would be the middle of the antenna at 45. So then you have to bump it up, plus, because they're 8-foot antennas. So you bump it up another 4 feet, then you bump it up another 3 feet with the top of the tree. So to maintain the 40-foot, we would be below a 35-foot rad center.
Okay.
And that would be lower than the building, and that would cause degradation in the
Now, your
propagation.
coverage.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Madam Chair.
It basically, the building blocks the signal,
Correct.
so that's why it has to be higher.
Yes.
Thank you.
Now, your guys' coverage maps in your presentation, is that based off of the proposed location, that's where you're going to be able to get the best coverage?
Yes, it is. In my presentation, it is, yes.
Okay. Now, with the city's recommendation for having it behind the building, would that require you guys to redesign the tower layout as far as the way it's designed versus, the 3 points, redesign it to a 4-point to be?
To most likely to get the same propagation and the same, we would have to increase the height of the tree and get up higher, maybe another 5 feet up higher than where we are, just to get up so that the bottom lobe doesn't block against the building.
Now, do you have any information or knowledge in regards to the 2015 proposal?
I was not involved in that, but I have researched it. I can probably answer a few questions for you if you have.
I guess ultimately it kind of echoes what our vice chair mentioned in regards to trees being taken out versus trees not being taken out back in 2015 when it was proposed to be on top of the building. have you guys looked at that again? I understand in the staff report it says it wasn't feasible because of the construction of the building.
Yes.
Is there a way that you can elaborate on that a
Sure.
little bit?
So looking through the documents from the project, the public storage buildings are basically tilt-up buildings, and they're not made foundation-wise to hold heavy loads on the roof. And the wind loading and the additional massing of the FRP, which is the fiberglass screening that was going to be placed up there, was too much for the roof, and so the roof was failing, and it would have we basically would have had to have rebuilt the roof and dropped new columns throughout the public storage building. And financially, yes, that was a huge cost to do, to retrofit and bring that up to structural to be able to provide that additional screening on top of the roof.
How often are your guys' towers maintained? Maintenance, routine maintenance?
Once a month.
Once a month they're maintained. Okay. I think that's it for me. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Anybody else? Fellow commissioners, I got some questions. In
Yes.
follow-up for the building design, did your design team look into the feasibility of installing it on top of that building? Didn't they know that it's a tilt-up building? When they designed it, they should have known what they're up against, correct?
I absolutely agree with you. And again, I was not part of that project. I do know that the engineering firm is not the same firm that's on this project. So there was some turnover due to that error, and that was an error, yes.
So how cost prohibitive was it? Because, you could have installed, or you could have proposed the antennas on the face of the building, covered with FRP, with no height requirement. Have we looked at that design? Because here's my concern. You're requesting 2 setbacks reduction now instead of 1.
Right.
Or instead of, or a setback waiver. My concern is, have we looked at different design so that we didn't have to look at waivers at all, because the antennas may be installed at the face of the building without significant height increase. I'm sure you know that.
Yes, I do know that.
And we didn't look at that option, didn't we?
We were looking at additional height in the area. Our original proposal was for a 55-foot facility out here. And working with staff, we did reduce the facility, which also reduces the coverage at this location. And then again, even going down to placing them on the parapet, you would be 30, 35 tip of height instead of 40, which is the rad of what we're proposing. And then what we first originally
there's still
proposed,
design that you can do to put it at 40-foot rod. Right? Nothing's impossible nowadays.
nothing's
engineering-wise.
impossible. Yes, nothing is impossible.
In terms of installing wireless facility, I'm sorry.
Nothing's impossible, but there
How
are
much you want to
costs
spend is the
associated
story,
with
right?
that. Yes.
Okay. Did you look at other alternative, like there's a building on the southeast corner of Vineyard and the freeway?
The Mission Produce Building?
Yes.
Yes.
And it's got height, it's higher than the surrounding properties.
Yes.
Why was that eliminated?
For these facilities to work, we do need a willing participant in the negotiations.
So you're saying that the owner's not interested in, did not entertain, or did you approach him? Did you
He
approach
was
them?
approached originally prior to the 2015
Mhm.
project.
And you did not approach them again today, right? Assuming that,
No,
They
it's
will-
the same owner. So once we had approached him once, I don't feel like they would have a change in heart, change in mind. We'd also been working with this group and have
okay,
a willing partnership there.
okay. Have you prepared a a propagation map for the location that staff is recommending?
Unfortunately not. No, I didn't have time. We got that, that comment last week right before the Thanksgiving holidays. And we did the best we could with the engineering facility and also reaching out to the landlord to see if they would accept that. But no, I did not provide a propagation map for that location. But
What happens if we approve this at this location, at staff's preferred location, and the propagation doesn't work? Are
Well,
you guys going back to the planning commission for that?
No, well, I have propagation maps that are for the 55-foot facility, which I believe would need to happen with the increase in height if we were to move to that location.
But we don't have a proof of that. We don't have the propagation here, do we?
I have them here.
May I?
Yes.
I mean, what's the difference? I mean, it would have been nice if it was forwarded to the planning, to the commission earlier.
Yes, these were submitted with the original application.
Was it? Okay. Do we have that anywhere on display, or do we? So you will require, okay, so if we go for staff's recommendation, you're going to say we need 55 feet.
We are going to need to be able to clear that building with the
I
propagation.
understand.
Yes.
Yeah, so you don't agree with this location?
I don't,
If we approve this, you're not going to build it.
it would not be, it would not work.
It would not work. Did staff ever, I mean, did you have this discussion with staff? Like say, hey, you know what? It's not going to work. Let's continue this meeting.
Well, I think at the time was the issue. So we had to go, we were out there and we were looking at the foundation, we were looking at drawings, we were talking to people, and again, we received this comment in the staff report last week. After this had been going through, this project has been with the planning department for over a year. So we have been, to get that kind of comment, we really had to kind of circle around and try to figure out, does this work for us? And this is what came out of that.
So you need a 55-foot height RAD if we approve it at staff recommendation.
We were going to
Location,
need,
just to make
yes,
sure.
we were going to need additional height at that location.
Okay. Have you looked at the utility lines under the proposed and the proposed and the recommended location? Would there be a conflict? Because you mentioned that there will be a large foundation based on what is required by your installation. Would there be a conflict with utilities?
We would need to do a GPR and an underground study at that location. We
At
probably
both
have to-
locations, correct?
No, just at the recommended staff.
The recommended location. So we don't know if there's going to be conflict, if it's possible to install it at staff's proposed location, correct?
We know that there is conflict with the building foundation.
There will be conflict with building foundation.
Yes.
Okay. And
And
with
then-
the proposed, you're certain that there's no conflict with utilities, there's no conflict with foundation, that this will be built as you guys are proposing?
Yes, we've already got the electrical approval from Southern California Edison. We've already done the underground USA service alert out there and reviewed the location, and this will work.
As far as the design, or as far as the type of tree that's being installed, are there any options to install as much foliage as can be installed on a particular tree like this?
So with
I mean, don't they
yes.
come with different options?
Yeah, they do. So they have different branch loading that you can provide, and that's what we would do. We would load the branches to the maximum.
The maximum?
Maximum that we could.
And we don't have that condition here, correct? We don't. I don't think we do. As far as foliage requirement. Okay. Well, sorry to ask too many questions,
That's
but
okay.
okay. So, okay. That's all my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
At this point, Planning Manager
Yes.
Kolwitz.
Vice Chair Chua and members of the commission, staff does have a question for both the applicant and just something to point out. The proposed location that the applicant has today would be at the corner of the building within a certain distance from the existing light standard. That's here. The center of the antenna that's would be within the folk eucalyptus tree would be approximately at the same height of the light.
So you're talking about this location right here?
Correct.
Correct.
The applicant's proposed location.
That's applicant's proposed location, and we're proposing it here.
Correct.
Staff is proposing it here.
The applicant's proposed location, so on the left side right there,
Right.
would be immediately adjacent to the streetlight.
Uh-huh.
We don't include any sort of conditions in the resolution that's been drafted for you in terms of safety concerns for that, or possibly even the relocation of that light, just due to our own employees needing to service that light pole as well. We didn't include such a condition because if the proposed antenna was going to be within the proposed location, there would be no conflict. But if the commission is of the mind to keep the proposed wireless facility at the corner of the building that had been proposed, we would need to talk about that sort of condition, just in terms of
And
safety.
there's a requirement for Southern California Edison. I don't know if this is Southern California Edison or street lighting for distances between lights. Is that correct?
There are operational standards that are out there. I actually, I don't recall who owns this light, because as you go throughout the city, some are city-owned, some are Edison-owned.
Right.
So that research I don't have at our fingertips right now.
Okay. So, you know
But I
what?
don't know if the applicant has any comments about that light relative to their facilities, but it's something we want to bring up as we're talking about those potential conflicts with utilities and whatnot, and the need to potentially move something at either location.
Yes, and that's my concern. Okay, maybe the applicant can explain the light situation, or that's the reason why I was asking about utilities conflict with anything, you know, if the applicant has looked at that, because I hate to give an approval on something that, you know, would come back to us and say, oh, by the way, you know what, it's not going to work. We need this.
Sure.
So,
So the way that we currently have designed, this is the right-of-way line here, where the sidewalk is. The branches will not overhang the sidewalk line. This light standard is out on the corner edge of that corner, so I don't see that there would be any interference with the light standard.
and
Yes.
you're speaking as an expert on this, construction expert, because
I'm speaking on being in the property and not in the right-of-way. That's what I'm speaking to.
okay, so the foundation, there will be no interference between the light and this location.
Correct.
Are we certain of that?
I am certain because we
Because
will be,
sometimes in the field, you know, we go, oops, we need some, you know, changes.
yes, changes do
And that
happen.
happens all the time, right?
Changes happen, yes.
Yep.
That's part of life, yes.
Mr. Chair.
But we will not be encroaching on the right-of-way.
Okay. Anybody else have any question? Chair Frank?
Yes. Say again how high you would need to be if you move to the recommended location?
We would like to have, we would probably need to go, we're at a 40-foot rad, we would need to go to a 45-foot rad, which would put the top of the antenna at 49, and then 3 more feet for the foliage. So we would be at 50, 51, 52 feet right
Somewhere
now.
between 50 and 55,
Yeah,
right? And that would be at the recommended location that staff is suggesting,
yes.
okay? Council, would it be, since in reading the staff report, I didn't see any analysis of the height and the dimensions of this tree at the recommended location that staff is proposing. which I think is probably something that would need to be considered by the Planning Commission. So honestly, Commissioners, I would like to see that alternative presented to us before we make any decisions tonight, because I think staff makes some interesting suggestions in this report, but, and it could be done.
Yes, I do, if I may.
Yes.
I do want to point out that that location, the branches would overhang the property line at that location.
Well,
Trees overhang anything all the time.
So
it
we
would
would,
overhang
we would,
where? Show me where it would overhang.
that's yours.
Maybe the photograph,
The overview,
yeah.
the top view.
Mr. Vice
Yeah,
Chair,
I've
if I
got
may.
one here that'll work.
Go ahead. I mean, hold on, please. Let's.
See,
I'm sorry.
I'm in the middle of a question.
That one.
I want to show you this one here.
Okay.
So this right here basically shows that we're encroaching on the foundation footing to keep it within the property line.
Okay,
We're going to have to move this is the outside of the foundation
right,
at least
10.
out to here, which would push
5 feet.
us out here.
Okay. Okay.
I just wanted to be certain, I mean, because we
Well,
will be out
you
of
know,
the property
we could
line and
always-
into the
we
right
could-
of way.
I understand, but that's with a eucalyptus tree that you're proposing. How about a tall cypress tree? How about a different tree?
No palm tree, please.
No, I didn't say. I'd never say.
Okay, thank you.
But, I mean, aren't there other I don't know, I'm not a tree.
There are definitely other trees. There's the mono pine tree. There's a new mono elm tree that they just came out. But generally, the arrays and the sectors are standard. So, I mean, it can be designed where the branches are really close to the antennas and in, but that's you're missing out on the aesthetics of the tree that way. But
don't
yes,
know.
it can be designed that way.
Well, if we're concerned about the aesthetics, why aren't we looking at attaching it to the face of the building
Yeah.
and covering it up with FRP? It's been done before.
It has been done. It just reduces the coverage area.
Not the coverage that you want,
Right.
Yes, it reduces us.
not necessarily the
It
need.
reduces it by 8 feet at this area.
Okay.
I don't know, you know. I'd really like to see a workup of the recommended location. Of the recommended location. I think that's something important that we should look at.
I mean, the dilemma or the issue I have here is that we have a recommendation from staff that, to move it on a location that hasn't been studied well.
At all.
So I don't know, I mean, and I want to see all the possible options before we vote on something like this. I mean, we're not sure if there's going to be conflict on any facility as far as staff's recommendation is concerned. We want to see a study of what that's going to look like versus what it is as proposed by the applicant, because the applicant's proposal may be better. How do we know that? We don't. The applicant stated that there may be a conflict with the foundation. It looks like it, but let's see what the alternative is. Can we move it out and see what the effect of that location, moving that in?
And I'm concerned that the applicant indicated he didn't have adequate response time to address the recommendation by staff to move this project.
Thank you for saying that, Madam
yeah.
Chair. That was one of
Yeah,
my concerns with
That's a
this.
concern.
Because the PZ says 18, and 18 represents the year that it went in, right? So he stated that it was before Thanksgiving where
Right.
they got this recommendation.
Right.
So what changed from staff's part that all of a sudden they realized, well, it'll be better to be behind the building versus at its current location?
No, I think, okay, maybe you want to explain how that 18 designation gets on the PZ number.
Chair Frank, Commissioner Chavez is correct. The two-digit number is the year the application had originally been submitted. There could be a whole number of reasons why an application takes time to get between us. It's not a number that's sensitive to which month of the year, so it's just simply a 2018 application. And then working with the applicant over the years, throughout the course of the application history, the community workshop, redesign, those sort of issues can lead
I guess
to the amount of time.
I guess the point that Commissioner Chavez and I are trying to make is, why did it take until just before this Thanksgiving to give the applicant an alternative recommended position?
Correct.
To that effect, I would say new staff coming on board and looking at applications
Okay.
anew.
For me, I side with you guys in regards to the concerns with receiving the staff's recommendation, but at the same time, based off of the applicant's comments in regards to the overhang leaving the property line if they place it behind based off of the circumference of their tower, for me personally, I would prefer where it's being proposed at. That's what we have information on. That's what we reviewed through the staff report. This saying go behind the building.
Okay.
Okay, anybody else has a comment?
Just one general question. Would this be a shared resource with other carriers, or is this just Verizon only?
Verizon would offer it up for a shared co-location resource if it worked for another carrier. Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. Could you?
Yes.
restate
The answer to your
that?
question is yes.
Okay.
It would be a shared resource if it worked for another provider.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's it.
So if that happens, would they come back to the city to request another height waiver if they want to add on to the tree? I think I'm getting into something legal here.
Yes, there is the 6409 application that can be requested.
6409. And council, are we allowed to discuss 6409? Because here's the thing. We have a regulation at 35 feet. The applicant's requesting 44 feet. 47 feet, I'm sorry. Thank you very much. So if the applicant or whoever in the future comes in under 6409A and says, I want 55 feet under 6409, would they be covered by our municipal code, or are we just SOL?
I would prefer not to give hypothetical discussions about the future, although for the record, I do want to mention, as I was speaking with Mr. Kolwitz, one issue that needs to be addressed if it's in this location is the proximity of the streetlight here. If you look at the depiction there, that streetlight would be right at the building height, so any of our workers would be right within the range of radiation. So that needs to be looked at as well as part of the analysis. If, assuming as it appears will happen, the Planning Commission is going to continue this item. That's a key issue. If you look at the
So
site-
the workers will be within the controlled zone?
they would be extremely close. So at a minimum, if it's going to be on the corner, then staff would be recommending the street light be relocated, maybe another, if it's on the corner, maybe you put two halfway on the side of the building on both sides, but you can't have that tree there with the street light. That was one issue staff looked at, and this is something that needs to be considered very carefully.
So there might be an issue with the exposure level as far as the members of the public is concerned.
More
in terms
importantly,
of,
actually, our city employees who may not
right, members of the
know
public.
the danger of the radiation if they're changing the light there in that street light.
Right, and if they're working more than what's allowed by the exposure limits under FCC, right?
Absolutely. So that is a concern. So no, to put it
That's
at
an
the corner where
excellent
the
concern.
applicant wants is
Sure
not
is.
acceptable with a street light right there.
Right, but I'm playing devil's advocate. is a sign enough to comply with the FCC as far as signage warning people that's climbing up that, or that's going to be raised at the height of the at the light to maintain, to do the to do maintenance work?
Well, I think there's a difference here because for purposes of a streetlight, that's one of our public works employees would not necessarily be aware that they need to be concerned about radiation there. They're changing the light. It's different than if they're in the building or they're doing maintenance around the building. This is actually in the public right-of-way. So
Right.
They have no choice.
They don't have,
Right.
and they don't have necessarily have to go to a location or pass through a location where a sign would be posted, right?
Even if a sign was posted,
I understand.
Right. I mean, but this is,
Yeah.
they literally would be
Right,
working from the
understand.
public
Yeah.
right-of-way.
Yeah,
I
so they
think
just go
that's-
up, raise it, do their job, and then go down
Right.
without knowing that they're being exposed. Okay, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
So that's another issue that we would recommend be addressed as the alternatives are considered.
Okay, so if we're looking at the location as proposed by the applicant, we don't have information whether the light needs to be moved or not.
That is correct.
Okay,
so it seems as though this, it seems as though there's a lot of information missing. I would welcome a discussion about putting this matter over to a date certain to allow staff to address the issues that the commissioners have raised and further information for us on the recommended staff position.
okay, you know what? So let's close public hearing and let's open up commissioner discussion, and maybe we could, if nobody
Well,
else has
would that
questions
be-
for the
would-
applicant?
Would that be agreeable with you?
Yeah, so we just would like to get a facility that
Well,
that
I
works,
understand, but
that-
we
that-
would, believe me,
that
the
works
people
for
who
the
live in that
network.
area would love to get that too.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's a bigger picture here. So I think we need a full analysis or a better analysis of what the alternatives are.
I agree.
Mr. Vice Chair, I just wanted to ask the applicant one thing. Based off of the discussion in regards to the concern from our staff, what is your response to that?
In regards to,
Our city employees working to change lights very close
RF exposure.
to the,
so we did complete an RF exposure report, and that's I believe that's part of your packet there, which takes in the public exposure and also private exposure. So that is in your
Yeah, but
planning
I
packet.
think, you know, when you're talking about people, you have to consider the risk of increased work comp claims to the city. These are the maintenance that's performed on a regular basis in the absence of any repair needs. You know, just right, there's regular maintenance, and then there's, you know, the bulb, someone could have hit it with a BB gun and they have to replace the globe, or someone graffitied the pole, workers have to go out and paint the pole. Car hits the pole, they have to go out and put it back. So, you know, having this source of radiation right there for workers who have no alternative but to go there, this isn't pedestrian traffic walking by. This is dedicated time spent at this particular location. And I don't think that's been looked at enough.
And will there be a fence that will secure people from climbing up the tree?
We do not have a fence proposed at
fencing.
this location.
So just a warning, right?
Yes, there would be
Because that's the
warnings.
minimum FCC requirement.
Yes.
But there's no way we can tell that one guy trying to be funny climbing up and see what it's like to be up there, right?
Oh,
We would, I mean, if it's something that would help the project, I'm certain that they would be able
yeah,
to
but
fence the facility if
yeah,
that's.
but they can just go up on the roof and jump over. You know, that's easier to climb a building than the base of that tree.
But the building's secured though. It's a self-storage.
Oh, that's true.
And, okay, anybody else has a question from the applicant? Go ahead, Commissioner Mario.
Sure. With regard to the RF study, was that specific concern or specific situation of a worker
maintaining the telephone or the light pole and being in that location near the antenna. Was that included in the study or not?
So the study would include somebody working on or near the roof, which I would say that the light standard is considered to be on or near the roof, and it does provide for that location. Yes.
I see. So based on the study deems that working on the roof, which is a similar proximity to the light pole, is not an undue exposure.
Yes, that is what the report stated.
Okay. Thank you.
You're
Well,
welcome.
the report states the
That it's
distance
compliant.
from the face of the antenna.
Yes.
Does it? How far is that? Between maybe 10 to 20 feet? Controlled zone.
Yeah, the controlled zone, I would have to take a look at the report.
You know,
to-
look at what we're doing. Look at what we're doing. We're nitpicking this whole thing because we're trying to find the answers to these general concerns that we're having. This really needs to, I think staff and the applicant get the idea that there are issues that need further response. So I'm going to go back to my question about, can we continue this to a date certain? Would commissioners agree with that? And I'm talking a short period of time, 2 weeks? Or we're not going to be here in 2 weeks. Our first meeting, January 9th.
That's correct.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's fair for all sides.
If you make that
What do you
motion,
think?
Madam Chair, I'll second that.
Okay, so let me close the public speaker portion. Go ahead, sir, and you may have a seat
Thank you.
if nobody else have a question. And let me now close public hearing, and
And
let's go ahead
And
and,
I'll make a motion to continue this matter to a date certain. How's our agenda looking for January 9th?
There are items that are potentially on that, but this would become the first item.
Okay. So I would move to continue it to date certain January 9th, 2020.
If I may,
Sure.
Chair, Vice Chair, do we have clarity on all the issues that need to be addressed so that we can make a final decision on that date? I know that the alternative location, apparently we'd need to look at a 52-foot,
55.
Whatever it is, they'll figure it
Yeah.
out. And
51, 52, 5 feet higher than the current location.
Fencing around the facility if needed, or, for extra precaution.
And
Alternative design, installing the antennas on face of the building.
an alternative kind of tree for the overhang argument.
And is there issue with, the concern regarding the overhang? Would it impact,
What would
I
it
don't know,
impact?
would it impact commercial trucks that are going through that?
All impacts.
way.
Give us all impacts. Okay,
And-
there's a
And
motion. Do we have a
relocation of
second?
The street light.
Second.
The street light has been
Okay.
brought up.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Frank and a second by Dozier.
Can we vote, please?
We need,
Roll call?
Yes, Chair Frank,
yes.
Commissioner Dozier,
Yes.
Commissioner Chavez,
Yes.
Commissioner Meyer,
Yes.
Commissioner Sanchez,
Yes.
Vice Chair Chua.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Moving on. Okay, study session, reports, planning manager.
No study session reports, but I do have a planning manager's report just on recent city council actions as well as upcoming things for you. So just following up, on December 3rd, just a couple days ago, the city council met and discussed 3 different items that had planning commission input at one point in time. So the first of those was the short-term rental ordinance. It went back again for the first reading. The City Council adopted the short-term rental ordinance amendments. The major change was including the provisions or exclusion of timeshares, if you will, from certain standards of the ordinance. That was adopted by the City Council, so that's now moving forward. December 17th, it comes back for second reading. For the inland portion, and then for the coastal zone portion, we're going to start engaging with the Coastal Commission regarding our short-term rental. So that's the next chapter that we're going through. Also on December 3rd, the City Council approved the Cannabis Retail Dispensaries Ordinance. There had been a discussion at one point in time, should residential uses be identified as a buffer? And City Council did not include the residential buffer, so it was simply adopted as had been presented to the City Council. And then the other item on the calendar was the 2900 Saviors Road 711 project. The applicant / appellant was the same individual. We have a section in our municipal code that needs to be heard within a certain amount of time by the City Council, but the applicant / appellant asked to continue the item to February 4th as they restudy their project. So the City Council granted that continuance request. Coming up, December 17th, the City Council is going to be hearing the Clinicus appeal by the applicant. We mentioned this at the last meeting. This is one where the applicant is requesting to reduce the size of the building to align their project with the parking requirements. So that's December 17th. December 19th would have been your next meeting. That has been canceled. You should have all received that notice by now. At the start of this meeting, we canceled the January 2nd meeting, so your next meeting with us will be January 9th, and we will at least have one wireless application on that agenda, if not more than one. So that's the seed for all of you. And then also at the last meeting, we announced various training opportunities, both the League of Cities Planning Commissioner Academy, as well as the American Planning Association conference, which happens later in the year. We just want all of you to think about that. We do have resources to send commissioners to those, so just let us know if you're interested, and we'll follow up with details. The March conference for the League of California Cities is going to be here soon, so if you're thinking about that, let us know about that one in particular. That one happens up in Sacramento.
I'm interested.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, I have 4 yeses. We'll be in 5 maybe. Well, it's cost balancing between both of those. I need to engage with our director about that, but seeing that much excitement about it, they're all very good. So we'll be in contact with. That, as well, it's also fellow planning commissioners from up and down the state. Correct. Okay, but that's great to hear that much interest in that. We'll be in contact with you about that.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Commissioner Meyer.
So a question on the short-term rental proposal. I know that one of the points that was brought up was that the regulation limit the amount of short-term rentals within an area, and the question was how small of an area you could assign it so that you wouldn't have, 10 short-term rentals on a block with one long-term resident, for example. Was that included in the language? Did that get lost in the mix?
No, there was a separation component as well as an area cap. So the separation that had been included was 200 feet from property to property line for how close the short-term rentals could be. And then there's a 5% cap for the general plan identified neighborhoods, as well as the RBF zone had its own 5% cap. So there's various geographic criteria that was included in the ordinance.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. Planning Commission business, fellow commissioners? Nope. Nope. Happy holidays. Happy holidays, thank you. Planning manager comments, I guess that's it. And with that, I'll call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you all.
And Merry Christmas.